National Baseball Hall of Fame new retail store, and improvements. He worked on improvements at the Stamford Bridge, Chelsea's FC's home in London. And when he was just 18 years old, Ben, in 2017, completed his tour of all 30 MLB stadiums. I think that deserves an applause right there. He says thanks, Dad, right? But Ben will discuss the design of the American Ballpark and study on the evolution of ballpark design and architectural trends through baseball history. So everybody give your hand up for Ben.
Thank you very much, David, and good morning, everyone. Really excited to be here. As David mentioned, I work with Canopy. We are a design-based project management and owners representative firm that specializes in ballparks and sports venues. We're based in Meadow Mill, just down the road, and have an office in Pasadena as well. I've loved ballparks my entire life. Grew up going to Wrigley Field and quickly was inspired to travel the country to go to all 30 of them. So thanks, Dad, Leo, and Mom and Grandpa for making that happen and entertaining my crazy journey. And given the chance, I love talking about ballparks, and I was given the chance, so I'm going to talk a lot about ballparks. So without further ado, we are going to hit a seamless transition to the Greek mythological afterlife. No seamless way to make that transition happen. The Elysian Fields, a paradise for the virtuous where the fallen gather in eternal bliss. An infinite green plain where heroes gather to celebrate and revel. A place of perfection, an ultimate goal to aim for. Often depicted by grassy green fields, surrounded by classical architecture, in a place in Greece so inspired by both sports and architecture. In the 1830s, a parallel by the same name was formed in New Jersey. Along the banks of the Hudson River, a luscious green park became the destination for many New Yorkers, a space for leisure, entertainment, and sports. These were the Elysian Fields of Hoboken. Within these beautiful grassy fields, a ballpark was created. And while the Elysian Fields cannot claim to host the first baseball game or be the first grounds to hold a baseball game, it was one of the earliest places that was defined as a regular destination for baseball. A place where people could consistently gather and count on that this new quirky American game was being played at a consistent place. And even though it wasn't much more than a grassy field with an infield in the middle and no home run lines, most of the major league ballparks, all the major league ballparks today and ball fields can claim the Elysian Fields as a distant common ancestor. The Union Grounds in nearby Brooklyn opened several years later, and this is the first fully enclosed ballpark. Of course, it was driven by a financial factor. The owner can now charge for attendance being inside a walled-off area. We see the grounds filling the entirety of the city block, surrounded by streets on all four sides. A 7-foot boarded wall surrounds the perimeter of the field. And for the first time in baseball, outfield dimensions have been set and the home run had been created. In this case, with a deep rectangular outfield, and yes, that is a pagoda structure in the dead center of center field, within the playing grounds. The Union Grounds could also be claimed as the first multi-purpose venue, as it was actually started with ice skating, and the owner thought this could be another way to bring in revenue throughout the spring and summer, and transitioned the Union Grounds into a ball field in its early days. These early parks were often constructed of wood, very simplistically, architecturally. really just using simple wooden bleacher structures to fill out the grounds that were provided to them within the grid of the city street. We see a couple early parks here, Lakeview Park on the left, Robinson Field to the right, and even though walls had now been erected in the sport, there were no limitations or restrictions on where those outfield perimeters could sit within the context of the city. This resulted in some very quirky and weird early dimensions. Lakefront Park in the left was actually only 180 feet to left field and 190 feet to right field. So as you can imagine, home runs were plenty. And eventually, Major League Baseball had to step in and realize this was somewhat of an issue for just the competitive balance of the sport. And in 1884, they established a minimum distance of 250 feet down the outfield lines. Besides those 250 feet, though, not many further implementations were set in place to the restrictions of the field, besides obviously the infield and distance to the pitcher's mound. A key non-rule that would influence the game for the century to come. In 1902, the Palace of the Fans opens in Cincinnati, Ohio. The game was now moving to a proper building, a defined and familiar structure opposed to the open and simple wooden bleachers up until this point. Looking at the architecture of it, we see how the form is symmetrical. We see this Greek-style pediment in the middle with the wings of the seating bowl stretching down the foul lines, kind of like wings from a spine. We see the first examples of variety in seating type here at the Palace of the Fans. We have 19 opera boxes running along the sort of lower perimeter of the infield. Underneath those opera boxes at field level was a combination of standing room only space for the more engaged fan that could actually have a very close connection to the field and players, as well as stable parking for horse-drawn carriages to drive up directly to the infield underneath the seating structure here. The columns are set behind to support the grandstand. Columns were a commonplace in really any 20th century early ballpark, resulting in some obstructed views. These were typically the cheaper seats. And then the columns support this capital and entablature leading up to the roof line. Real defined architecture. And the building appears somewhat grand, especially compared to the simplistic wooden bleacher structures that have really led us to this point. But in the end, it's quite simple architecturally once you kind of strip it down. But the ornate details and the sense of creating a place of grandeur to watch the sport of baseball would continue to become commonplace in the decades to come.
Was it all wooden park?
At Palace of the Fans?
Yeah, all wood?
I believe they started to introduce some other materials at Palace of the Fans here. Shibe Park, this next park, was the first that is like fully built of steel and concrete. And from the street front of Shibe Park, there's really no obvious way to tell that there is a ball field behind. The ornate facade suggests a typical 20th century office building in a French Renaissance style. The brick starts as rusticated towards the ground and moves into more defined and ornate details as you move up to the facade. You have this feature rotunda on the street corner with the dome, and architectural features are now clearly expressed within these buildings, but within the context of their surrounding neighborhood, not trying to do anything far outside that. Shibe Park sat completely within the city grid, resulting in these rooftop seating on the right side of the image in the lower left there. So there's little delineation between where the building starts and ends, but the field had become this centralized heart of the neighborhood and a consistent public gathering space. I like this quote from Hall of Famer Richie Ashburn from the Phillies that said, Shibe Park looked like a ballpark, it smelled like a ballpark, it had a feeling and a heartbeat and a personality with all baseball. Shibe Park marks the true beginning of what's known as the jewel box era of ballparks. And I like to think of jewel box as having kind of a dual meaning. The spaces are both decorative and ornamental, very expressive architecturally, but they're also very small scale and create an intimate environment tucked within to the existing grid of the city. The ball field being the jewel within the case of the surrounding neighborhood and buildings. Forbes Field in Pittsburgh totally fits that bill, tucked snugly in the Oakland neighborhood, just a short trolley ride from Pittsburgh. They replaced Exposition Field in that same locations, constructed in only 4 months during the Pirates' 1909 World Series winning season. Like Shibe Park, constructed from steel and concrete. The facade also has this sense of grandeur, but still within the scale and context of the Pittsburgh neighborhood it occupies. The park introduced a taller grandstand, and with that introduced circulation. We have ramps and elevators. We have luxury boxes on the third tier of Forbes Field. And we start to see some defining features that really call to a park's characteristics, such as the large scoreboard tucked into the wall of left field to keep track of all action across and around the league, as well as the brick ivy covered wall and sort of iconic light towers, and of course this beautiful view of the Pennsylvania Hills. Ballpark design blossomed in this 1910s, 1920s era. We had countless parks formed deep within the neighborhoods of their respected cities. The Polo Grounds is one of the quirkiest that really took full advantage of the city block that was provided. Was multi-purpose and hosted football as well, but was a true baseball venue from the seating bowl and behind home plate. And having a sport that allows you to have this malleability in field dimensions just results in so much quirkiness and cool things that are so tied to the core of the sport that you won't see in another sport that has sort of these defined end zones on either side. I came across this overlay of Willie Mays' catch, and you see the location that took place at the Polo Grounds compared to sort of a typical ballpark dimension today. And that's really...
The reason why the Giants won the World Series. But they played in Cleveland, the Indians.
Well, we played in the Polo Grounds. Go Giants!
But to that point, unlike other sports, the field that your team is occupying is actually having a direct influence on the story of the game. And to me, that's what's so special about baseball.
Played in Cleveland, stuck in the snow. Bernie, my 10-year-old green, and Dave Pope against the right field fence, leaping for it. Plus, you know, it's 258.5 foot fly, game-winning 3-run home run. Nick Wertz last the home run on every other ballpark in the world, including Yellowstone.
Moving right along. Okay. Two standouts of this era followed in Boston and Chicago, the two oldest remaining ballparks still to this day. Fenway Park was built on a particularly asymmetrical block within the Boston city grid. As Lansdowne Street sharply slices off left field, creating a short distance of 310 feet down the left field line, which in turn created the Green Monster, both to separate from the street and protect the cars in the automobile lot and the garage across the street. But the rest of the city block allowed for these deep grandstands to fill in the remaining perimeter of the field. While left field was at the deep, or while left field had the tall wall with a short distance, the right field wall, meanwhile, is only 5 feet high and incredibly deep down the right field line, and is noted as one of the potential reasons that Babe Ruth was happy to leave Boston. More on that in a minute. Then is my hometown park of Wrigley Field. This building, I can give all the credit to my love of baseball and the game, and just countless memories growing up here and continuing to go here through my young adult life. This one was, Wrigley Field was also built within an irregular block. This primarily residential neighborhood, quickly adopted rooftops, known as a baseball haven. Lights not added until 1988. Wrigley also hosted the Chicago Bears, rest in peace, through much of its history as well. I think it's also worth noting what's occurring at the Negro Leagues during the same period. While these jewel box ballpark continued to flourish, an entirely different world of baseball greatness was occurring at the same time, and we see similar jewel box features within a lot of these early Negro League parks. Rickwood Field still stands to this day as the oldest professional baseball park in America, and it was just so special to see Major League Baseball make the effort to celebrate Rickwood Field a couple of years ago and host a Major League ball game there and introduce this world to the next generation. But also see these sort of iconic defining features, irregular dimensions, using the space that's provided, and these cool iconic light towers. Now with a major switch up, Yankee Stadium was constructed in 1923 and was the first forecast of kind of the monumental nature of the ballparks that were to follow in the coming decades. It was still built within the city grid on the site of a former lumber yard, but as you can see, the site is larger than a lot of these jewel box ballparks, both allowing for the scale to increase immensely. Capacity opened at over 58,000, and also utilized some of the adjacent space leading up to the park as a plaza leading into the ballpark. As I mentioned, first ballpark of this scale. Space was not really a constraint, but the Yankees still used the malleability allowed by the sport of baseball to create a very short wall in right field, which Babe Ruth was a big fan of. On the other hand, and I kind of see this as the first stadium that is a stadium, not a ballpark, taking its own architectural direction to define what it is. They're not taking direct cues from the surrounding office blocks or residential blocks trying to fit into the scale of the neighborhood. They are announcing to all that this is where the Yankees play, this is where greatness occurs. And from your approach, you can immediately tell sort of this grandeur from the scale and materiality. This classical style is almost reminiscent to what you would see in the Roman Colosseum with this sort of central arch in the middle. There is no denying the presence or grandeur of this building. Limestone is used throughout, an early form even then of the Yankees kind of flexing their wealth to the city and rest of the league. Throughout the history, and that stadium did live up to its gravitas with the Yankees winning 27 World Series titles as a resident of the building. The new Yankee Stadium, its predecessor replaced the old building in 2008, but far more tailored to kind of a premium experience than the original. The monumental scale of Yankee Stadium was a note to others across the country, and Cleveland Municipal Stadium is the first ballpark that kind of starts to move outside the city grid. It's still nearby downtown, but it's really just touching the perimeter. And with this large scale and an infinite land, there are no restrictions. The design could be perfect in a large symmetrical circle. A capacity ballooned to a massive 78,000, and the deep outfield resulted in very few home runs. They quickly realized their mistake and actually had to bring in the outfield fence through like a temporary fashion with fans standing on the outfield because it was just impossible to hit a home run in this location. But apart from that, the scale also just lost a lot of your intimate connection to the game of baseball. The scale also loses its sort of context and size with separation to the city. There is much less ornamentation around the facade. It's kind of stripped down with simple windows, and even in the footprint, the grandstand did still have columns throughout. The cantilever technology hadn't quite advanced there yet. And one last item to note in Cleveland Municipal is that word municipal. It was the first ballpark that used public financing to build a privately owned team's ballpark, using taxpayer dollars. Until this point, team owners had all paid for their own respective buildings across the league.
I pay a cold July night at that
And Cleveland Municipal was a bit of a precursor to the stadium to follow in the coming decades, moving outside the city context. The automobile gained a lot of traction as a large segment of the American population moved into the suburbs post-World War II, and the baseball stadium followed. And it was remodeled and kind of stripped down to simply serve their function. A sea of parking was needed to accommodate all the vehicles, so it was removed far outside the city. Candlestick Park, built in 1960, is kind of an early example of this, built firstly for efficiency and functions. It was a multi-purpose stadium, hosting both baseball and football. With the multi-purpose need, you kind of lose a lot of good sight lines for both, and both atmospheres of both sports are a bit compromised. And there's still architecture expressed. There are some nice details sort of within the columns that support the roof line, but it's very much its own vocabulary now, not trying to be influenced by the city and the blocks that surround the neighborhood. That's also not to say that successful architecture and distinct design was not seen throughout the early 60s as the cookie cutters started to develop. Dodger Stadium did embrace the massive scale and leaning on the utilization of the car, but opened up the seating bowl wide to the mountains and embraced a far more distinct mid-century modern style with some nods to the space age also, and sort of this sweeping wing-style roof. And to this day is one of my favorite places still to catch a baseball game. There were also some really good construction and engineering milestones that were achieved in this era. Through the 1960s, the space program and NASA scientific achievement were at a peak. And in the spirit of technological advancement, what was known then as the eighth wonder of the world opened in Houston, the Astrodome. The Astrodome was the first indoor air-conditioned space for baseball. The massive roof spans over 460 feet. And the field could not grow grass, so they invented AstroTurf for that.
Boo.
Boo. The building did have some ambitious design goals. It was originally inspired by the Palazzetto dello Sport in Rome, which was built for the Olympics on the right. A little bit of that vision comes through looking at these old photographs, but it has far less of its grace, and the concrete circular bowl makes it feel very, very heavy. And even though the roof was a technological wonder of the time, the symmetry, materials used, and multi-purpose function of the Astrodome would inspire a dark era for ballpark design to come in the 70s.
Like the vet.
And the cookie cutter era was now in full swing. City after city, team after team relocated from their downtown neighborhoods to the suburbs, or even not if outside of downtown, in a space that had little context with the surrounding blocks, where simply more land was available. Their facades gave no effort to reflect their city, nor was an effort made towards monumental design like Yankee Stadium. It's just brutalist and concrete. The dimensions were symmetrical and consistent. With so many teams moving, the distinct identity of ballparks across the country were being lost. And the leveling of the outfield distances, the enormous foul territory, just the overall consistency was actually kind of a risk to the quirky nature of baseball itself. The inside the park home run, the triple, and just the beauty and variety. With all these being multi-purpose, you can see how difficult it is to fit a baseball field and a football field within the same footprint and actually have good sight lines for both. You're going to take some pretty large compromises in both directions. Veterans, Three Rivers, and Riverfront were three built at this time. All in cities I spoke of earlier in Philadelphia, Cincy, and Pittsburgh. All these cities had ballparks which were pioneers of the jewel box era. The Phillies player Richie Hebner once said, "I stand at the plate in the vet, and I honestly don't know whether I'm in Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, St. Louis, or Philly. They all look alike." And like looking at this comparison, I totally see what he means. And this is not to say that baseball greatness or incredible atmospheres were not achieved within these many, many concrete bowls across the league. It's easy to critique the architecture and nature of these cookie cutters, but they are still a key chapter within the evolution of baseball and the ballpark. So I just don't want that to be lost. But then from the dark, the brightest light came out of Baltimore. It was 1984, and the Baltimore Colts departed in the middle of the night for Indianapolis. Boo. And the move partially came from the uncertainty of a future of a football venue, as Memorial Stadium's age was showing and quickly coming to an end. With the Colts leaving in the late 1980s, the Maryland Stadium Authority partnered with the Baltimore Orioles to make sure baseball was preserved in Baltimore with a new ballpark. Initially, the state of Maryland thought this would be a multi-purpose venue, but with the Colts leaving, it would just be for baseball. And downtown was experiencing a bit of a renaissance at the time, so why not place the ballpark there where the economic boom was? The architect selected for this project, HOK, had just completed the new Comiskey Park in Chicago. And although there are some cool aspects around this design, it still sort of has that large, massive scale that has little connection to the game, and the upper bowl was too steep. It's facing away from the city and just doesn't really have much context with its surrounding. HOK and the architects originally proposed designs that were quite similar to the new Comiskey Park in early design, and the early design proposals were heavily based on Chicago stadium architecture. A man by the name of Larry Lucchino, legal counsel and then president for the Orioles, had a different vision, as he pictured an old-fashioned ballpark with modern amenities in the heart of downtown Baltimore. He had grown up in Pittsburgh, attending games at Forbes Field, and was drawn to the intimate nature and atmosphere created by the Jewel Box Ballpark. Within this downtown location, where baseball was being brought back into the city, shouldn't the Orioles' new ballpark embrace the new character of Baltimore, as so many of these Jewel Box ballparks did. Larry Lucchino brought Janet Murray Smith onto the design team. As my woo! As my mentor, Dr. Charles Steinberg, often tells the story, Larry was working on the design, and a young Janet Murray walked into the office and said, "You need me." And Larry said, "Who the hell are you and why do I need you?" And Janet said, "You have a vision for an old-fashioned ballpark with modern amenities, and that's just up my alley." And it certainly was. Throughout this process, the Orioles held design concurrence with the Maryland Stadium Authority and could sort of heavily influence the vision of the direction of Camden Yards. And to HOK's credit, they fully embraced the vision that Larry and Janet started to picture at this spot in downtown Baltimore. The warehouse was going to be an early casualty of demolition, but Janet proposed to save the iconic warehouse as a backdrop to right field and sit as a part of the city context of the ballpark. Not only does it act as a ballpark, but it actually ties people into the park from the city grid, with people entering through the center field gate. The facade of Camden had a prominent stone base, similar to a lot of the jewel box ballparks, leading up to more intricate brickwork. The floor break that you see between the columns, the arches, sort of nicely breaks up the scale of the facade, and the facade also stops at the beginning of the upper level, not trying to tower above it like all the concrete bowls that preceded it, but being very respectful and a good neighbor to the surrounding blocks and streetscape. The shortened height also allows for the steel structure above to be expressed in the upper deck, seating, and roof. That expressed functionality of the steel is also quite reminiscent of many early parks. But Camden Yards wasn't intentionally trying to replicate the design of a jewel box era ballpark or trying to force historical significance. It was not trying to be a game changer in the world of ballparks. Rather, the building was simply trying to do what was best for Baltimore in the city context. A lot of the details of the jewel box ballpark were utilized in the effort of this vision, from little things such as signage that are not just sprinkled on at the very end to add color, but actually tied into the core and veins of the building, expressing the history of the team and Baltimore in these little moments that you just continue to realize as you walk through the concourses. Camden Yards was the first park since Ebbets Field to have all straight outfield walls instead of the symmetrical curved domes. It had stacked bullpens. And I mentioned the signage. So it's drawing on all of these elements, but not intentionally trying to be a replica or a copycat, just doing what is best for this respective site and vision. And even though it wasn't trying to change the game, Camden Yards would end up changing the landscape of not only baseball and ballparks, but American downtowns across the country. Many parks to follow in the coming years took inspiration from Camden Yards in bringing the ballpark back downtown, and also building seating bowls that were far more connected to the game and playing field and players. Busch Stadium, Coors Field, T-Mobile Park, PNC Park, Progressive Field, Great American Ballpark, just to name a few. And no park in sort of this retro modern ballpark style fit the bill more so than Oracle Park in San Francisco. This park, like Camden, really heavily leans into the surroundings it's given and the actual city context of the block that it is given. It had an incredibly short distance in right field, slicing off a portion of the right field fair territory and opening up to the beautiful bay. As you can see, the scale of the building behind the seating bowl is incredibly in line with surrounding blocks of San Francisco. It is also not trying to tower above. It is being a good neighbor and fitting into the context of the city it's given. Not all of these retro modern ballparks, I think, are quite as successful as Camden or Oracle Park or Busch or Coors. I think once an architectural style is defined and captured onto and just deemed successful, it's very easy to try to replicate that design. But when it's done so with kind of little context, it does not have the same feeling to it. It starts to feel almost like a copycat removed in a little bit theme park-esque. Citi Field was heavily inspired by both this retro modern wave, but also a direct example in Ebbets Field. But Ebbets Field was built within the city block, where the scale made sense with the surrounding buildings. Citi Field was built in the middle of a parking lot that did not have surrounding context. With also the expanded seating, if you look at the scale of a person at Ebbets on the left and Citi or Ebbets on the right and Citi on the left, you can see the massive difference in scale and how Citi shrinks Ebbets Field, and sort of the watered down details of the arches don't quite, for me, capture this this beautiful and simplistic, ornate facade of Ebbets. But the new parks in this era also were not afraid to branch out and try something new and distinct architecturally within their cities. Petco Park does something entirely different than the brick and green steel precedent that so many were capturing. It does something much more appropriate for San Diego. Petco Park was another Larry Lucchino driven project, and also one of my favorites. I think we have started to enter a transitional era for both the landscape of major league and minor league ballparks. Concurrent to the numerous projects built throughout the 90s and early 2000s, these retro era modern ballparks, the 30 and 40 year leases on this building have been passed or are rapidly approaching. In negotiations with the city and team, the future direction of the ballpark is often at stake as a bargaining chip. In addition to the upgrades that are necessary to the core due to the age of the building, such as upgrading MEP or building systems, code compliance issues, teams have started to negotiate much more often with cities towards a path for much more ambitious renovation projects. This work will typically include an improvement in a diversification of fan amenities and experiences. Every year, it seems several more teams unveil the latest and greatest in their stadium. A lot of new hospitality spaces, group areas, different experiences and vantage points to view the game over traditional seats. And teams are somewhat trending towards lowering capacity in favor of these more open and diverse game watching experiences. Within these lease extension negotiations, if a path towards renovation is viewed as inadequate for a building, a lot of conversations around new builds are often pivoted towards. Football stadiums are kind of in a similar cycle with that 30-40 year lease range. I think 8 new NFL stadiums are in the horizon or near occurring within the next 5 to 7 years. And again, that's kind of due to when the multi-purpose stadium went extinct after Camden Yards. Respective football and baseball stadiums were built concurrently in their respective cities. But across both sports, the standards are rising very rapidly, and teams are very quick to jump on other teams' examples to introduce the latest and greatest renovations. If public financing is not available, teams are also heavily investing in their own buildings. I think the Rogers Center could have been viewed as a likely candidate for replacement. It was kind of the last of that cookie cutter era. And I think it's really cool to see the work that the Blue Jays put into their outfield and other areas of the ballpark to preserve that building and really transform it for the next generation through strategic changes, not redefining the whole building, but changing the overall perception of the fan experience through knowing where to renovate the architecture. On the minor league side, I think we're also going to continue to see a flurry of ballpark work. When Major League Baseball took over the minor league system a few years ago, they implemented some pretty rigid building standards with the goals of competitive balance and players across the different levels. The minor league system shifted around a bit moving through different levels of the organization. Cities lost teams and gained teams because of these sort of code-related, player-related guidance restrictions that MLB has put in place, which at its core, I think, is good to the competitive balance of the game and all these players coming up. I think it has been a little hard for some small cities across the country that teams simply do not have the resources to upkeep a small stadium towards so quickly to meet these new standards that some pretty cool baseball locations throughout the minor leagues have been lost. And then, of course, we obviously saw the saving of Wrigley Field about a decade ago, and Fenway Park another decade before that. I feel wherever feasible, existing buildings should continue to be respected and built upon, renovated creatively for sustainability and to preserve the history and aura of the venue for the next generation. I think that great care went into both the Wrigley Field and Fenway Park renovations, and it really does still feel like you're stepping back in time, walking into these buildings, even though they have implemented a lot of modern amenities and new technologies to keep up with the other 28 teams of the league. I also think we're on a bit of a crux within the way that ballpark design could go over the coming decades. Truist and Globe Life Park, the two latest MLB parks, both replaced parks in really fine conditions that were only 20 and 25 years old respectively. The Braves cited transportation issues, traffic issues, and the desire to introduce development to the core reasons for the move. The latter, I think, is the primary driving factor, as Truist Park was unveiled with a massive adjacent development parcel known as the Battery. Luckily, Turner Field was preserved and repurposed for college football after the Braves departed. I feel like Truist Park has a good enough design. I appreciate how the steel structure of Truist allows for the concourses to have a connection to the field at all levels. And while I think the Battery is also nicely built and offers some cool amenities to partner with a baseball game, there is something to me that feels a bit closely scripted around it. I feel like when developments are built in tandem with the ballpark instead of naturally growing with the park and neighborhood, the layout can feel somewhat artificial from an urban design perspective, especially when removed from the city context, as Atlanta is. The replacement of Globe Life Park was more so a reaction to the Texas heat and need for an indoor venue, but the Rangers also jumped on the opportunity to introduce a similar development in Texas Live. And I think teams across the league have been deeply enamored by the Battery's format and real estate financial opportunities. Through numerous cities, teams have looked to add a development footprint, even Wrigley and Fenway in the Wrigley and Fenway neighborhoods. The Cubs and Red Sox have slowly absorbed the surrounding blocks of the city, transforming the neighborhood into a mix of hotels and retail and residential. When done properly, I think surrounding development can be a vital addition to the evolution and economy of a downtown or neighborhood. I think the surroundings of National Park or Petco Park, Oracle Park, have really flourished since their ballpark opening, with development that has grown with the neighborhood. The financial appeal of partnering a development to a ballpark may be a driving force, I fear, in the abandonment or replacement of some current ballparks in the decades to come. Especially when development space isn't available in the city grid, teams could inevitably look outward toward the suburb and towards open land. And I'm a little worried history may repeat itself with park locations shifting away from their city, because political, financial factors can be very powerful compared to design principles or historic precedent and celebrating a neighborhood. And the development precedent that is being set is going to be a powerful one. Then again, the new ballparks for the Royals and White Sox will likely be moving closer to the heart of their downtowns. The Athletics' new ballpark will obviously be in the heart of it on the Las Vegas Strip. Obviously, I think it's really horrible what happened to the Athletics fan base in Oakland, and I think that's just a really tragic story to rip baseball away from that city. From just a ballpark design fan, even though this is certainly not going to be an ode to the traditional or jukebox ballparks, I'm still excited to see it, to see where this next generation goes, and it's going to be a spectacle regardless. So, I am cautiously optimistic that the direction of future designs, both renovations and new builds, will continue to embrace the context of their city. MLB expansion is on the likely horizon too, and within talks between the likely candidate cities, I think that downtown ballpark destinations will be a driving force in the cities that are selected. I would like to conclude by highlighting two projects that I worked on early in my career and how I kind of witnessed some of these design principles that I spoke of taking place within these two buildings. First with the renovation project, and then with the new build. Starting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In Pittsburgh, the Pirates ownership came to Janet and wondered if there was an opportunity to elevate their already top-tier ballpark. I think we looked around and initially said, how do we improve this building that's already so revered? This is known as one of the top ballparks consistently across the country. This building would need to be carefully respected. The Pirates were ready for an upgrade, although they didn't exactly know what they want and kind of came to us for guidance on direction, but they committed their own money towards PNC Park to assure it was forward-thinking for the next generation. As we learned the perceptions and behavior of the fan base, we learned that the number one thing about PNC Park to all the Pirates fans was the view of the Pittsburgh skyline. And obviously, and rightfully so. When pressed on it, fans had a hard thing defining what else set PNC Park apart besides the iconic view. And looking around the building, we realized that there was really no way to interact in the view between the field and the seating bowl and the bleachers. These large concrete bleacher sections separated the in-game activity from the Riverwalk and skyline on the right side. Walking through these concourses, we had a goal to open this up wherever possible and create strategic programming within the outfield Riverwalk that felt like it had always been there. Not trying to do anything above and beyond, but be respectful to the great architecture that PNC already set and massage the outfield to create these sort of distinct locations. We removed about 5 to 6 rows of seatings on the right center field bleacher section and placed a feature bar behind. We did so on the left side of the batter's eye as well, and more in dead center field, with the bar replacing the security man coast that had created a wall blocking the view of the field that now welcomed fans with a view of the field as soon as they walked in through the center field gate. Throughout the Bear concourse, we also populated it with life, color, tied-in signage and Pirates branding, really at the core of the architecture, added a lot of loose furniture, and really made this a space that you would just want to be at, whether you were interested in every pitch of the Pirates ball game or just a cool place to hang out on a Pittsburgh evening and get a drink. We tied some kids areas directly close to the bar as well to allow a space for the kids to play, the adults to gather. Drink rails right along the field are general admission, and fans, it's cool to see fans lining up 2 hours before the game, and that GA location right on the outfield gate is the first location they go. Still the cheapest seat in the park. Next, I want to finish with Polar Park in Worcester. My career began as an intern with the Kentucky Red Sox, working with Charles Steinberg and Larry Lucchino and Jana Marie Smith. And I was lucky enough to work with that team on the design and construction implementation of Polar Park in Worcester. When Polar Park was first conceived, I think many thought that it would make logical sense to make this a close cousin of Fenway. Take the traditional jewel box, classic vibe of bricks and green steel, especially with Fenway as a precedent, and bring that to Worcester. The lead architect, Tommy Quirk, is a Worcester native and had a different take on the materials used. Worcester is very much a steel town, and the site of Polar Park sat atop the old Weingarten steel factory. Tommy grew up in Worcester and was inspired by the Higgins Armory on the left, and thought a sort of steel building and facade would be much more expressive to the city that presented us with this site. So you see the same kind of exposed columns on the outside, and levels very clearly expressed throughout the building, and these grand windows on both the ground retail level and club and office level around the top. When the site was selected, the southern side of Madison Street, where the little Revington label is, south of Madison, was viewed as a likely and tempting candidate for a location for the ballpark. This site to the south was flat and notably larger. The footprint could offer a wider variety in design opportunities, and would likely be more cost efficient as well. Yet the northern site was selected across a Madison Street. This could be viewed as a curious decision, as the ball field was very tightly compressed by the live train tracks to the left, and a steep grade change in right field as you move up towards Summit, and then falling back down towards Green Street. That northern location importantly pulled the ballpark towards the heart of the city, closer to the activity of downtown. It also gave us an opportunity to utilize the existing street grid, which feeds in from multiple locations directly into the ballpark. The grade change also helped inform all areas of the outfield. When we looked at the hill, I think it's easy to look at that and say, yes, this is a much more challenging site than the flat parcel to the south of Madison. But in the end, the almost 40-foot difference between the top of Summit Street and the grade of Madison Street just informed the architecture naturally. And we were able to create all these sort of distinct group spaces marching up the outfield grade to make up for that height difference. This also led to a natural cousin of the green monster in the Worcester wall on the right of the screen there. It would be easy to sort of think that the green monster should be in left field to replicate Fenway Park, but just as the site in Boston was the reason that the green monster had to be formed in left field, we thought that that was kind of a more faithful tribute to Fenway in building this outfield wall because of the dimensions and site that we were given in Worcester. The bowl of Polar Park on the top right is smaller than typical, sort of tucked very closely within the skin of the infield. And then as you move down into the outfield, that opens up to a plethora of group and standing and general admission and berm seats, really encouraging you to wander the ballpark. The Summit Street that runs just beyond the batter's eye, and then the Worcester wall in the bottom images actually becomes part of the city, part of the concourse from the city grid on a game day. We have programming on the opposite side of that street, and just really embrace that this ballpark should fully embrace this tight, quirky, unconventional site that was was just occurred with the city of Worcester. And Larry Lupino, Jana Marie, and Tommy Quirk all really understood this intimate and quirky vision, and I'm very grateful to be a small part of that process. What my biggest takeaway in reflecting on Puller Park in particular, and a lot of these early jewel box ballparks, is in seeking efficiency and function, we often lose what makes a destination so special. A blank slate is often the most appealing, or bigger is always better, or once a model has been proven, it's easy to replicate to the design and avoid risk by building on a known foundation. It can be risky and scary to branch out outside of that and do something that the site, either the site or city, or is just sort of naturally discouraging from immediate challenges upon first looking at it. I think the world around us constantly strives for this perfection and continued advancement, but the ballpark allows us to pause and reminisce. The walls can tell us the story of the city, and the field behind holds the site of countless successes and failures. The Jewel Box Ballpark, and so many of these other ballparks that Camden Yards inspired after, are beautiful not only for their ornate details and architectural art, but they allowed the city to form around them. And in turn, they helped form the core of the sport of baseball and script the story of the game. Camden Yards reignited this story, and American downtowns follow. Imperfection can often create the most beauty. The restraints and hardships of a site can lead to the most creative, artistic, and iconic moments of a building. We often strive for perfection in our own lives too, that one day just everything will work out and be okay, and we'll reach our own Elysian fields. Yet life always seems to throw curveballs our way. And in the difficult moments of our lives, I think those moments can inspire us to bring the best out of ourselves, just as ballparks have over the course of the last 150 years. In embracing the challenges that surround us, we open ourselves to opportunities that we never would have expected, an opportunity to create beauty in the asymmetrical site of life. Thank you.